Good morning, everyone. We will start webinar 2 in 1 minute. Good morning. Welcome to webinar 2 of our online museum training entitled Museum Management Training for Higher Educational Institutions, Transforming University Museums as Sites of Cultural Education and Creativity Tourism. This is brought to you by the Commission on Higher Education and UP Baguio through the Museo Kordilyera. Last week, we had webinar 1 with our panelist, Miss Venus Tan, who talked about museums as tourist destinations. We also had Dr. Raimundo Rovillos, who talked about the role of university museums in tourism and creative industry, back to back with Dr. Jobers Versales on why museums matter, or the state of the university museums in the Philippines. So we had a very engaging talk. We are flooded with questions about the intricacies of the role of the museums in tourism as well as in creative industry. We also had a preview of our virtual tour of the current exhibition on textiles entitled Hand-Woven Tales, the Warp and Weft of Cordillera Textiles at Museo Kordilyera. First, I would like to start with the rationale and the project aims of this museum training. First, it aims to provide training and technical assistance to higher educational institutions in planning, setup, or reinvigorating museums to be used as platforms for supplemental and/or alternative learning system and tourism. For instance, we have the Indigenous Peoples Education, or IPED, which now needs museums to have this kind of dialogue with indigenous cultures and the different communities. Second, it will incorporate materials from international partners and courses to show examples of alternative or virtual museum exhibits and to use blended modality, both online and face-to-face, for training. In the museum management training for HEIs, we aim to have capacity building, internationalization, and impact. In the capacity building, we aim to deepen understanding of the educational role of museums in higher educational institutions, acquire advanced skills in museology, museum work, and transfer of skills in museology to higher educational institutions, and to enhance the capacity, appreciation, and support for institutions who employ museums for quality education and innovative pedagogy. In internationalization, we aim to develop partnerships with international and local museums to exchange and source out materials, particularly on alternative learning modules for museum exhibitions and activities. We aim to steer greater awareness and appreciation, as well as instill pride in one's cultural heritage and identity through museum exhibitions and services, and to contribute to conservation of regional and national culture and heritage, which are important anchors for sustainable growth in the country. And lastly, the impact. We aim to mainstream museum-based learning in higher educational institutions, academic, extension, and production programs. Increase capacity of staff to support training needs, collaboration with higher educational institutions, and at the end of the training, we hope to come up with a directory of HEIs all over the Philippines, or HEI museums all over the Philippines. Collaboration with international museums, advocates of iPad using museums as platform for higher learning. Since last year, we convened 15 panelists who are museum practitioners, conservators, and scholars in the field who have an extensive experience on museum work. The presentations will be shown on scheduled dates. Second, the online training comes in different stages. Level 1 will be on basic museology. Here we give an overview of museum work and how we can assist HEIs to jumpstart their museum work. The Level 1 training will took place yesterday until November 28. Level 2 will be advanced museology, which will delve deeper into detailed work on museums. And this will take place in February 2021 in time for the Arts Month. Level 3 will be the Technical Assistance Program, where selected HEI museums will be assisted by museum experts, on-site visits, and brainstorming on how to improve the museum. The final output will be a curated museum, which will be an application of the knowledge learned from Level 1 and 2. The project will also provide museum supplies that can be useful for this endeavor. Hopefully, Level 3 will take place in the summer months when travel restrictions will be lifted, and if not, we will do everything online. In each of these levels, activities and exercises will be sent to the participants for completion, which they can work on with the respective museum team. All this will be assessed by our museum experts. Third, HEIs and individuals who successfully completed Level 1 and Level 2 trainings will be issued a certificate of completion and goes to the second round of the museum training, which will also be training of trainers that will be highly advanced. Hopefully, lessons learned from the trainings will cascade to their respective units. Once you have completed Level 1 training, or if you have attended each of the webinars, a certificate of attendance will be issued by registering to our link after the webinars. Based on the Training Needs Assessment Survey conducted by our team, this is the updated data that we gathered. So we found out that there are 87% with an existing museum, and then 13% have no building yet. So in the 13%, this means that their museums are located in a library building, or they co-share that with a department building, or the museum is shared with other offices. While the museum is conceptualizing their museums, 33% have no space yet for their museum, while 68% already identified a space for the construction of their museums. In the recent survey for the existing museums, you can see that there are various problems that they encounter in the museum, such as water leaks. There are also signs of decay. There are also cracks in the building. There's also flooding. Of course, there are also pests inside the museum. Then molds, which is a common problem for artifacts and also inside the buildings, as well as water supply, electric supply, problems in the water piping, and of course the electric wiring. So these are the problems that are encountered by existing museum buildings. With regards to the staffing, this is just a glimpse of the survey that we conducted for the Training Needs Assessment Survey, and it seems that there are, according to this, there is lacking in staff in order to carry out projects and maintain the smooth operation inside the museums in this case. And in the recent updated information, it is important for the following to undergo training. So we found out that there is a high percentage on the preservation of artifacts, the management of museum, including the operations, and then the handling of artifacts, even the valuation of artifacts, and cataloging and mounting of museum displays. So it is important to have this consideration. So we actually designed a online training based on this training needs assessment. So it is important to underscore all of this. For the training, each of the HEI participant will receive a training kit, a basic museum handbook, a learning toolkit. This will be 2 volumes based on this training, and it will be sent to all of you soon in time for the online training on handling of objects and conservation of artifacts in week 3. And lastly, we thank the participants from all over Philippines, from the Cordillera Administrative Region, the National Capital Region, Ilocos Region, Cagayan Valley, Central Luzon, Calabarzon, Mimaropa, Bicol, Western Visayas, Central Visayas, Eastern Visayas, Zamboanga Region, Northern Mindanao, Davao, Socsargen, Caraga, and the Bangsamoro region. If you have other concerns and queries, please feel free to email us, send us a note on our FB page, or call us. On behalf of our chairperson from the Commission on Higher Education, Dr. Popoy de Vera, our Chancellor, Raimundo Revillos, and our project team, along with Dean Toto Colongon of the College of Social Sciences, our museum staff, our IT staff, we welcome you to the online museum trainings for HEIs. So for today's session in webinar 2, we have the museum organization and administration. So we will have Mr. Dannie Alvarez, museum administrator and curator of the Yuchengco Museum and president of the Alliance of Greater Manila Museums or AGMAM. Tomorrow, we will have architect Aris from 90 Design Studio, who will talk about museum design and architecture. We will start the webinar shortly, and you can send in your questions for the webinar talk on Zoom and on YouTube. Many thanks, and looking forward to a productive 2 months for all of us. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to webinar 2. It is my pleasure to introduce to you our panelists for today, Mr. Dannie Alvarez, Tito Dannie, as we call him. He is currently the president of the Alliance of Greater Manila Area Museums, otherwise known as AGMAM, the Regional Association of NCR Museums. He is also the current museum administrator of the Yuchengco Museum. So, hello, Sir Dannie. We are live from Makati right now. Baguio is raining, so it's good to have this online museum training. Mr. Dannie Alvarez also served 2 terms as member of the Executive Committee of the Subcommission on Cultural Heritage and as head of the National Committee on Museums, or NCOM, under the National Commission for Culture and the Arts. He is the founding president of the Philippine Association of Museums Incorporated, or PAMI, in 1987. He is the trustee of the Promoting Advocacy for the Arts Foundation Incorporated, or PAAFI, and also a trustee of the BenCab Art Foundation. Mr. Alvarez worked in several museums in various capacities as curator, administrator, consultant, such as the Metropolitan Museum in Manila and the Ayala Museum. As a museum consultant, he generously assisted with his time, energy, and insights in the setting up and reinvigoration of different museums all over the country. To name a few of his involvements includes the Museo Iloilo in Iloilo City, the National Artist Botong Francisco Studio Museum in Angono, Rizal, of course, Museo Kordilyera at UP Baguio, the Nueva Vizcaya People's Museum and Library in Bayombong, Nueva Vizcaya, and Museo Ezorog in Goa in Camarines Sur, to name a few of his engagements. Some of the exhibitions that he curated were on the national artists such as Jose Hoya, Napoleon Abueva, and Benedicto Cabrera or Bencab. Aside from his extensive museum practice, he also worked in advertising, public relations, event management, and book production. So you can see here decades of museum experience for our panelists today. Without further ado, would like to start the presentation, and let's say hello to Sir Danny,
Hello to everybody.
live from Makati.
Yes. Magandang umaga sa inyong
All
lahat.
right, so we'll start the presentation. Thank you po.
Hello everyone. Today, we will be discussing a very important aspect in museum operations, and this is the museum organization and administration. This is not a very popular subject amongst those who want to put together a museum, thinking that all they need to do is get a consultant and everything will be resolved and put together by this consultant. We will now make sure that you will not be consultant dependent and you will now be able to put together your own museums with least assistance from the others. First and foremost, as a university museum, we should be able to go and do some kind of research. And the United Nations has this specialized agency, which is the UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, which is tasked to promote world peace and security through the international cooperation in education, the sciences, and culture. Under the UNESCO, there is an important committee, and this is the International Committee on Museums, or what we call ICOM. The moment you get to be a member of this important agency, you will now have access to a lot of information and a lot of guides and papers that will let you put together your museum more efficiently. Of course, other than the ICOM, under it, there's another council, and this is the UMAC, the International Council for University Museums and Collections. When you become a member, you can select to be a member also of UMAC. And UMAC provides us with regular newsletters and journals on the operations of museums worldwide. As a university museum, we should always consider the importance of governance. And as a university museum, our key word here is competencies. Therefore, when you put together a museum, you should be able to look at all the tasks that has to be delivered in terms of competencies. So we have the management competencies, the information and collections management care competencies, public programming competencies, museology competencies, and general competencies. The ICOM has put this together so that we are going through an efficient roadmap. And of course, not only in terms of how-tos, but of course, making sure that all of us are provided with opportunities for further training. And we will now be able to find out which of these competencies are to our liking. When we put together the museum, we should always start with who is the governing entity, because we have to find out who will be the responsible unit to operate and run our museum. And the more practical approach is for our university to organize a museum board. And as I've said earlier, the board can now be called out if there are already existing competencies within them. And of course, all our faculty members can perhaps fit into one of the competencies that I have enumerated earlier. The first thing we ought to do when we want a museum to be set up in our university is we have to be very specific as to whom do we want to serve and why. Of course, our primary audience would be our faculty members and our students. And when we extend ourselves, and we have to be able to do it with dignity, especially when their communities are concerned. Now that we have set the important policy in terms of collections by the board, we will now have to find out how these policies will have to be executed in terms of actual action plans for your museum. The more important thing is that we will have a very good registration and collection systems in our museum. The ownership official forms should be complete. And of course, we start off with a temporary receipt the moment the object is received by the museum. We have to have a gift deed, or what we call a deed of gift, for those that are donated, and a purchase order tracer. For government museums, perhaps this is what we call a memorandum receipt number, or an MR. When we do our documentation, the more important thing that we have to put together is a condition report. Upon receipt of the object, we have to make sure that we will indicate all that is visible in terms of the status of the object. We have to come up with an object catalog card, one accession logbook for all those that are received by the museum, the physical numbering of the objects, meaning these are objects that are attached to the actual object, and for those that are on loan, we have to come up with a comprehensive loan forms. We should also take time in planning how we put together the back room of the museum. What is the storage environment? Is it complying with the basic conservation limitations? Will there be recording of humidity and temperature levels in our galleries and in our storage rooms? Do we have the appropriate shelves, cradles, and boxes for our objects? And of course, because these are things that are hidden from the public, we should always consider that we do regular pest control systems in our backroom offices and storage spaces. For our galleries, of course, the primary requirement is that it should be user-friendly for all our patrons and visitors. Safety considerations should both apply to patrons and objects on display. Of course, our museums must always have provisions for access for our PWDs. And lastly, with regards to our directional signages and labels, they should be very clearly put together. They are in their proper areas and can be read by different levels of our audiences, they be students or they be adults. Let's go now to our exhibit galleries of our museums. The more important thing that we have to consider will be the security of our objects. And of course, we should follow certain guidelines. Specifically, on how we mount our exhibitions and how we construct our gallery walls and exhibition panels. We should also look into consideration what kind of programs we need to put together in a university museum. Unlike private museums, which can perhaps put together one or two programs, the university museum is expected to come up with much more. Number one, perhaps, we are looking at public lectures and demos. Here, the teachers and the students, together with the community, sit together to listen to lectures that are put together regularly and demonstrations of certain craft industries perhaps, so that they interact, especially during the question and answer portions of these programs. Talks and symposia is also very important because the museum is always the best venue for our faculty to present papers that they have put together that are involving research or dissertations for their masteral or doctoral programs. The museum, as a space for learning, can be very good venues as classroom extensions, whereas objects are part and parcel of the classroom. Teacher training is also an opportunity that can be available in a museum. Actual museum setting, the objects, the visitors, can be a very good point of reference for a teacher to be trained. Of course, the teachers will have to prepare pre and post visit discussions, and this is also a very good studio for our students. Lastly, of course, because we will have a lot of volunteers and a lot of on-the-job trainees, the docenting program should be consistent and must be regular. To make our museums more exciting and it becomes my favorite place for a student, we have the museum cafe and the museum shop as a supplementary spaces, but are very important in terms of making sure that your students and your faculty and your community return regularly to your museums. There will be a lot of ways by which you'll be able to manage these two spaces, because a lot of the universities have their own press, so their books, their journals can be available in your museum shops. And if you have courses in culinary arts and hotel management, the museum cafe is a very good opportunity for them to be trained as well. So, with all of this being put together, I think you'll be able to have a practical roadmap on how do you plan your future university museum. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sir Danny. That was a very engaging talk. I learned a lot from listening to your pointers about your presentation in establishing the museums. Okay, so we have a lot of questions coming in from our participants. Just to reply to the query about accessing the notes of our panelists as well as the audio or video presentations. This will be accessible via YouTube later on, and also from our museum website, and then on our FB page. Okay, Sir Danny, we have a lot of questions here coming in. Okay, so here, for a neophyte HEI planning to establish a museum or a small LGU museum, what do you think are the first most important steps that they should address?
Okay. First and foremost, we should always consider what are the courses that are being offered by the state university or the city college. From there, we will know already what will be the competency of the organization in putting together a museum. Secondly, also, which is more important, is perhaps things that we did not do before, is that we will have to come up with what we call cultural mapping of our community. Because it is also important that the engagement, as I have said before, will cascade not only for students and teachers, but also for our community as well. Please take note also that a lot of people, a lot of students who are not in college will have to be attracted to the courses that the university is offering. A good platform for promoting this is through your museum. So putting it together, again, as I've said, the competencies are already more or less categorized. We will now source the people who we will choose to be the curator or to be the members of the board of your museum. The board, as I've said, will create the policy towards collections management, towards operations, towards administrative um, aspects of running your um, new museum. Looking at that, uh, I don't uh, I don't go through the normal path of finding a space and then afterward saying we want to put a museum there. Principally, I think what we will have to do is change that kind of pattern and look at it in terms of how we will be able to sustain the museum with programs, a good and not necessarily big, even modest, but important museum collection.
Okay, thank you very much, Sir Danny. Perhaps we can tell our participants what this cultural mapping is all about. And I think coming from the past webinars, there is an emphasis on research before setting up your museum, or research before bringing in objects. Can you expound further what this cultural mapping is all about, and how can we access this for our participants from all over the Philippines?
Yes. Okay. Yes. That is a very good question and a very timely question, considering that just very recently, the National Commission for Culture and the Arts had already put out online what we call a cultural mapping toolkit. This toolkit was in the making for more than 2 years, and they tried to fine tune this and made sure that things go smoothly in terms of conducting research on ground.
Mhm.
And what is very important here is that the initial trust will be a trainer's training program. Before we embark on this, and this can be led by some of our members in the faculty, be it natural science, be it in anthropology, social sciences, or even history, to be able to now deduct what is there in terms of heritage resource in the community. The engagement here is people to people. We'll have to do interviews with the elderly, with the young folks, with families, and you will be able to unearth a lot of history stories, be personal or otherwise, and you will be able to now put them into some kind of an order of how you can prepare
a very good narrative for your museum. Cultural mapping is the first step that I have to consider as the pivotal point, in doing your museum programming, and in fact in establishing museums. You will be very surprised that you will be able to unravel a lot of gems, within the community. And the community, having initially participated through cultural mapping, you already have stakeholders that will continue to help the university or the college, for that matter, in putting together not only programs but of course unearthing some important objects, you know, from their uh, closets, or from their lola or from their grandparents or what have you. Uh, I think also uh, it is also, if you are going to engage yourself with the cultural mapping process, uh, the NCCA is also has that technical assistance program for trainers training. It is advised, though, that for purposes of practicality, that this can be done on a regional basis or on a provincial level basis, rather than just having four technical assistance requests coming from one province or one community, rather than repeating the coming in of the trainers, which is a little bit impractical. And of course, that will also save time, because if it is an aggregation of more than two or three units, then you can be prioritized as a possible uh, uh, area for the training to be implemented.
Thank you very much, Sir Danny. So, in relation to the cultural mapping, a lot of the participants are asking where they can access this cultural mapping toolkit from the NCCA. I think there's a PDF copy that you can download, and there's also a book copy that you can request from the NCCA, right? Yeah. I
It
think,
is al-
yeah.
it is also very important because we are based uh, in certain communities. Partnerships, when you have cultural mapping programs, it is advised for state universities or even colleges to come up with an agreement with the local government unit to be able to facilitate the efficient uh, processing of the research procedures, because you will be going from one barangay to the other. It would be what, and of course, and I'm very sure that the local government units are more than willing, to collaborate, especially with the state universities. And this will help also the local governments implement the mandate that there should be a program for heritage protection and heritage promotion in each of their uh, constituent areas.
All right. Thank you, Sir Danny. So there is a question about for neophyte HEIs who want to set up their own museum. So what shall they do if they have insufficient funding at this time? And what can be done by the HEIs who are still looking for funds to build their museum? So, so you mentioned about cultural mapping. So, aside from cultural mapping, what can be done when the funds are not yet ready or they are still looking for funds to build their museum?
Okay. Uh, the very important resource that you have, and which other private museums don't, and I envy you, is that you have a strong base of what we call the alumni association.
Mhm.
And most of these alumni associations, have already in them some of the professionals that had graduated from your university or college. And more often than not, some of them also are now based abroad and are more than willing to put together um, some kind of programs or do and support these programs. Fundraising activities also can be done for museums, right? However, you should do it very, very judiciously, considering that fundraising events, can also happen, so that you will have to come up with a program wherein you will have to express your mission, and you will have to show what you intend to put up, and how important this museum would be for the pursuance of your educational mandate, right? Uh, while tourism, as we have heard from Ms. Dinustan, as an important element, right? But rest assured that that can be very, very successful if the university would be able to create very interesting narratives for their museum. And unfortunately, the NCCA will not be able to help you in terms of grants if you are a startup. However, if your museum is already up and for the last 2 or 3 years, you can request grants, and this is offered annually for renovations of your galleries or creation of museum programs. Uh, that's when because they have to be guaranteed that the system is already in place, and there's already an accountable unit, as I've said, the board or the director or curator who will be able to implement these things. Um, you need to do your promotions internally. I would appreciate also to share with you some of the initiatives of one of the museums that we have assisted, is that when they were doing their museum, and of course, as we have said, perhaps it started with a small school room or an area beside the library, right? A very interesting initiative of the Partido State University, I must say, is that their faculty in charge, who was teaching uh, social science subject, had required their students to submit or donate, not required, but to engage them to donate items, to the museum. And through the years, she has done this, and the objects, are quite fantastic, because they were even able to put together one whole house. They even had the fishing boat, right? Simply because people felt that, they had to disregard some of this simply because they have now acquired other things. And through this initiative, sariling sikap, with the faculty member and some of the students, and these students, who are already graduates, would return to the museum and look at the things that they have donated or shared, uh, has become now a very good example of engagement, because the engagement now becomes permanent rather than temporary.
Thank you, Sir Danny. So we talked about collecting, no, with
Mhm.
that kind of example from Museo Isarog. Um, there's a question about this one. What resources could you recommend that we can use as guides when it comes to drafting policies and guidelines in collections management? Uh, do you need to draft certain regulations in collecting objects, and what kind of objects do you need to collect for the museum?
Okay, that's a very important question, and something that I think I missed out in my presentation this morning. Uh, that's why we were saying that the museum board is very important, simply because the museum board is mandated to create policies for the museum, and creating policies that will be more or less the guide of the officer who will be nominated or elected as a director or as a curator. Uh, Collections policy comes from the museum board. What are we going to collect? Why are we collecting certain things? And of course, because we are a university museum, first and foremost, the source of our materials will be from the field research of our faculty or of our students. The engagement of certain things when you present a dissertation or a paper requires a three-dimensional example, rather than just photographs. And if you have already gone through the field, therefore there should be an open call of perhaps donation of items that you have discovered in the field. This is very important simply because the biodata of the object is already there because it's from a research initiative. And that is very important. And that will be something that will guide others, when they see this object. Not necessarily on display, what you call for public consumption, because again, in exhibitions, there are two types of exhibitions. There will be an exhibition that's are curated and part of a display, and there is what we call uh, a visible storage. A visible storage is an area in your museum where you will have all other items, that are there for some reason or other. And if these are collected judiciously over the years and they are cataloged and they are more or less streamlined, accession for those who can, which are what you call healthy objects, and for those that cannot stand the rigors of time, and because these are from the field research, there is also the process of what we call the accessioning, because we do not want the objects to be the source of a deterioration of the other objects, right? So that is principally the first uh, opportunity for collecting. Secondly, are donations, right? These donations come in from, as I said, from faculty members, from your student body, from alumni. But again, a policy has to be in place regarding acceptance of donations. It's very critical that we cannot just clap our hands and say thank you for a donation. We have to be very sure what is appended into that donation. Sometimes donors will have to insist on certain things when they donate an item.
Mm-hmm.
There will be someone who will say, I want this piece to be the first object that you see in the door of the museum. Will you be able to accept such kind of what you call appended requirement? That's why the it's always the board will be the shield towards these uncomfortable situations, and it's best that there is a written policy, because a written policy can always be presented with all due courtesy to someone who would want to donate, right? And of course, the moment they are donated, they have to be properly attributed to the donor. Recently, there are also some concerns about donations,
Mhm.
especially if the donor uh, has some unfortunate reputation in the community. Therefore, will the university accept this? Will we be able to sanitize the object and say this does not correlate with the with the one who's donating, unless it's an anonymous donation, right? I will not pursue the different cases of sometimes of situations wherein will we accept this from a gambling lord? Will we accept this from whatever, whatever, right? These issues will come, right? And especially if that thing is very sensitive because they are perceived to be leaders in the community, political or otherwise. So a policy is always very, very important. Now, there is also a very sensitive aspect in collections wherein some of you might ask, okay, we have four objects of the same thing. Can we sell? one or two of them, right?
Yeah.
This is again a very important aspect of the collections policy that the board will have to take. The accessioning actually is restricted in any museum per the ethics manual of the International Council of Museums. You can only sell if you are buying another object. You cannot sell because naubos na ang pera for the salary of your, you know, of your staff. That cannot be. You cannot cross over and say, I will use this money for something else. A collection must be able to build itself, no, with this kind of what you call protocols. And as a university, which is something that I said is peculiar, no, which the other museums may not have, is that we are all perhaps should be required to have what you call study collections. Study collections are things that you don't put in the cabinet, but for students to handle, to look at, to even disassemble if need be. If you're looking at certain scientific directions as to the nature of the connections of a wooden specimen or even a fabric, no, and looking at dating of certain uh, textile strands, threads, or even the use of dyes. And the construction is always part of an academic exercise. This is something that perhaps should always be emphasized. The museum is the extension of the classroom. And it's only in the museum that they will be able to see how these objects are stored, cataloged, and properly cared for.
Right. Thank you so much, Sir Danny. You touch a lot of things there, such as the collections management, also about ethics in collecting, and having these study collections for the museum. Now, there is a recurrent question from our audience, because we know that the spirit of the museum is on the collections itself. No? So it is important to have a museum building where to put all of this. Now, there are several connected questions. For instance, from Alicia Esguerra, she is asking how much is the initial fund needed to set up a building or a museum building in itself. Then I'll do the follow-up later.
Well, actually, that's a very tricky question, right? Because we promote the creation and establishment of museums, but we do not want to create an ideal for all of you because one way or the other, a large sector of us might be frustrated. Oh, we don't have that kind of money. Oh, it's not going to be easy for us to put it together, right? And that's why the transportability of a museum is very important, right? Because in any campus or university building, you can create a museum within it, right? It's just a matter of how you are going to put it together so that it departs from the usual consciousness that it was a classroom or perhaps the former canteen, right? Or perhaps, a faculty room or whatever. Uh, I am from that notion that we should not be restricted into what we ought to do in terms of building a museum. Because building a museum is not a structural process. It is a process by which you build a collection, you build the confidence of the community that the building follows, right? An important thing is that while I understand in my previous term with the Committee on Museums when we do technical assistance, right? It's very difficult for those who are assigned to museum to sell their idea to the president or even to their board, simply because they don't have the proper way of presenting their concern. Will I show the weakness of the museum by saying how dreadful it is at its current state? Or will I create one corner in that museum that will delight the leaders of the university? Wow, that can be done. Why don't we multiply it? Right? So a simple classroom setup with very impressive museum exhibition and a very serious, very little education program will hit the target immediately. Why don't we multiply this, right? And remember, our leaders are result oriented. What will be the effect when we put this together, right? And looking at it, you know, if you're lucky and you have an adjacent classrooms, start with 2 classroom sizes with 2 doors, an entrance and an exit. You're done. Simply because from there you can create already a very beautiful modular exhibit, right? That can very well serve the purposes of your university. I would not want to peg a number. I don't want to frustrate most of us simply because if I say a number and unfortunately your university has that number, will your president or will the officers of the universities, yes, we will use this money for your museum. It's the idea first before the building. That's how I approach this situation administratively. Okay.
Thank you, Sir Danny. So, very well noted on the concept and the idea should come first before the building, right? So, now we go to, for instance, the thinking aspect of the museum rests on the members of that particular museum. So, there's a question here about who should be in the board, who should be in the university museum board, who constitute that university museum board. Is it wise to include politicians as well for a startup for this particular aspect?
Actually, when I said museum board, I was proposing that the board be constituted internally by faculty, right? Or the non-teaching, what you call managers, no, of the school. I will not want to engage that there should be someone from the outside. Although there are some universities I have, I have, I have come across with, or a provincial university, or yeah, wherein the governor sits in their board of regents.
Mhm.
But that is in a different scope because that is total management of the museum, of the university. What we are trying to come up here is a specific core group of at least maximum of 5 people who are the operational pendulum of the university or the college, because they will be the one to be able to come up very, very clearly and consistently what kind of programs that they have to engage the museum with.
Mm.
I am not into this. This is unlike a private museum wherein you get someone outside because you need continuity in terms of funding, you need support from uh, what other components, no, of the community. One thing very nice, no, that perhaps you should always agree, remember, a university is always an asset. Why? A lot of private funders are more attractive to fund universities. And again, if you have a very good program and you have a very good projection, or in the business side of it, they call a business plan, private monies can always be plowed into you, right? Because corporate governance, no, in terms of community resource giving, no, is always there. You'll be surprised that all of them have this annualized budget, in supporting communities. And the best, because you are an educational tool, you are not an entertainment platform, the more you are attractive, for such funding. Did
Yes.
I answer it completely, or are
Yeah.
there anything that I
That,
forgot?
that's a very thorough answer in addressing these concerns in the HEI. There is another question from Arturo Pulga Jr. Uh, he said that he works in a family-owned private HEI.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned about the importance of governance, no, in your
Yeah.
presentation.
Mm-hmm.
So is it necessary to have a separate board for the University Museum, independent from the existing governing board of the HEI?
Well, this all depends, no, Dr. Amoris, because number one, I've known a lot, and in fact, there is one museum, in the Visayas, owned by the family, and they have their own museum, right? However, looking at this, there are pros and cons. Uh, as I said, the board of the university is thinking macro, especially for private museums, right? Because there should be revenue streams for a private university for it to operate, right? Unlike state universities and state colleges, wherein your budget is uh, more or less guaranteed annually, unless they dissolve the university, correct? And this is the difference, between that uh, thing, unless the owners of the what you call this, the university is aggressively and wholeheartedly devoted to putting up and operating a museum, then that can be a very good what you call advantage for you. But just automatically lifting them and putting them in one capsule and you become also the museum board may not be the best formula. So it is a case-to-case basis because we have known one or two universities which were owned by prominent families and also had collections privately. And it has become successful simply because the owner or the wife of the owner is simply just a heritage uh, proponent, right? And that means that becomes an advantage. However, take note that a good university museum should be run by the director or the curator. How independent will the curator or the director put together exhibits without somebody breathing on his neck? And why are you not exhibiting mine? Why did you remove that and put another, right? These are instances wherein you have to be able to get a what you call a a layer that protects the curatorial integrity of your museum. And that is a specific temporary, what I call museum board. You may have another term for it, but for practical purposes, I call it a board, right? Because they will be the one to be able to parry certain uh, situations, no? Wherein it might be detrimental to your initiative to come up with a very important educational anchor of your university, and that is your museum.
Wow, thank you. Well said, Sir Danny. So have so many questions. I think we will have to extend until 12 to address all of this if you are okay.
Yes, actually, you may have noticed that my presentation is quite short because I had thought that the best thing for us to do an active engagement with this very rare opportunity is to listen as to many questions that are coming in. Meaning, because I see in your roster that there are different kinds of museums. No? You have a science museum, you have a history museum, you have a social science museum. And as much as possible, we try to more or less look at this landscape and hopefully we'll be able to answer as many questions as we have. I will be more comfortable if the questions are answered after the so that when the session ends, everybody more or less is relieved of certain things. They are attending this webinar with, you know, hoping that there will be some solutions, no, that they will bring home, or you know, because everybody's working from home, but rather you know, bring to their museum. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much for your generous time, Sir Danny, for accommodating more questions. So we have maybe until 11:45 for the Q&A. All
Yep.
right. So with regards to the organization of the museum, this is a question from Alex de los Santos. Can
Mhm.
you suggest a streamlined staffing structure for a university museum? So
Yes.
more streamlined.
Well, number one, one thing very particularly advantageous for museum in a university setting is that some of the faculty members can be assigned temporarily to the museum, which lessens their teaching load, right? And if you have this as part and parcel of your system, you'll be able to get quite a number of people who can work for you, perhaps on a yearly basis or on a semestral basis, right? And of course, remember, if because you are all trainers and you have the equipment to be able to transfer skills quite quickly, students who are already doing their practicum is the very good resource for supplemental support of staffing. This can only happen if everything is manualized. Before we start doing this, the museum board would have already put together certain manuals already. How to put together exhibits, how to conserve and protect collections, how to design basic exhibits, etc., etc. This can be all in manual form, right? And what happens is that if this is read, and when you read this, you don't read this alone. If you are already there four, if you are there, there are four members in your team, which is very skeletal. I hope that you go through this together like a mini classroom, right? And therefore you engage and look at all these things. And eventually, you'll be able to now internalize all of these processes. The multiplier effect right now would be tremendous simply because the first initial wave of museum team can now be the facilitator or the instructor for the next team. And what you have, you must have a curator or a director, whichever the position title would be. And I said, it is because we are collection management driven, we have to have someone who is good at collections management, meaning how to take care of objects, how to put and catalog objects, etc., etc. This is not something new, no, because number one, also the uh, the 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 core the sector which does very uh, thorough documentation and cataloging is the library. If you have a library science course, no, this can be very helpful also because you don't have to teach them. That's already their second life. What you mean, no? And looking at it, because I will always presume that the janitorial service and the security services is provided by the university. Therefore, it's no longer part and parcel of a problem, no, of the museum. Correct. Therefore, I would say a minimum of 3 people, a maximum of 5. You will have a great museum.
And thank you, Sir Danny. So as long as you have a good team, I think you have
Yeah.
like-minded people on board, then you can actually produce a very good exhibition and other educational programs for the museum. All right. So let's
If,
have a different question of your
okay.
interest from Joseph Kua. So he mentioned that we mentioned earlier in your brief bio that you work with several museums around the Philippines. Okay, what is the strategy? What is the strategies that you used in the museums that you worked on, and what is the proudest moment that you consider memorable? Do you have
Well,
great museums?
uh,
And
it's
what is the challenging part,
like,
probably?
well, it's like this, no? Because I'm 200 years old. That's why I had that opportunity, you might say, right? But in terms of really a broad stroke, I went through a museum that is just being established. I had also an experience wherein a museum, which is already established, is creating a new building, right? And there are museums that are already operational, and the system is already much in place, right? Normally, the sophistication is something that comes in depending on the organization of which the museum is attached to. Because in private museums, normally they put this under a foundation, right? And the
Yeah.
foundation, museum is only one of the segments that this foundation um, is uh, is doing, right? Normally they will have other concerns, no, under that foundation. Strictly having it as a museum per se uh, depends on a very good board, right? A very good board that will be able to support you financially and to be able to support you scholarly wise, meaning there is curatorial independence, no? That the board has given the head of the museum. I will not be able to say which is the best at this point in time, because what happens that is particularly different from in our profession is that we get to be proud of things we do because we are given enough opportunity to do it over and over again. The museum is a very, very nice profession, museology. Why? Like, you come to create a museum exhibit. I mean, you come to create a museum exhibit, you put it together, you launch it, you open it up, and then you're happy. After 2 weeks of rest, you create another one. So in all of this endeavor, all of these little successes are the things that makes you very, very fulfilled. Especially if the education programs are very successful as well, right? Simply because you were able to transfer that idea to another sector. No? And that has been the thing that made me stay on, really. Although I had a little, what you call, deviated and done other things, I still go back to museum work because it's absolutely fulfilling. There might be problems, yes, simply because we do not know how to initiate or put it together. But the moment you already have something on board, then you will be surprised that uh, that little idea will create another bigger idea for you. So that is something that I have to share, and perhaps you will also observe that in some museums there are people who stay on, right? Or they stay on in the field of museum even though they transfer to other museums.
Mm. Thank you, sir. That's it touches the heart because as museum practitioners, really the fulfillment is to tell your story effectively to your audience or to your public.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, so ang daming tanong. Okay, so a related question with regards to your experience from setting up a new museum in various stages. They are already there, but you don't know how to. They don't know how to work on their collections, among others. There's a question about from Hobart Savior.
Yep.
Uh, from Lifestyle Museum La Castilla.
Yep.
So he is asking, this museum, it houses memorabilia of the founders of Liceo University.
Yep. Mhm.
Attorney Rodolfo N. Pelaez and Elsa Pelaez are the founders.
Yep.
This is privately owned. But its reach is the community as we slant it contributory to Northern Mindanao history and heritage.
Yeah.
In terms of funding, will our Castilla Museum be eligible for government funding and support, or even those of international partners, given the private nature of this particular museum?
Yeah. Hi, hello, Hobart. No? Uh, Nice to hear that you are there. Well, actually, that is a very good question simply because there are a lot of misinformation regarding NCCA. That they had thought that principally NCCA will only give grants to public museums, no, or libraries or what have you. Actually, no. Uh, the NCCA is open to both public and private museums, right? What is important though is that you will be able to facilitate your request for grants if you are actively a member of the regional association of your area. If you come from Mindanao, then there is such a thing as a Mindanao Association of Museums, right? And because the moment you are a member there, you'll be able to now more or less have a radar of what are the available grants, no, that come by annually. And of course, as a regional association, the association is also given that opportunity to apply for grants so that they can uh, put together what you call a regional summit among its members so that the exchange like this, that what we're having, is facilitated. Again, looking at this is a very important platform wherein CHED had interfaced itself, no, into this kind of thing. Simply because, as we have said, we need all from all different angles or different directions, no, this kind of support, right? I am more particularly interested with our CHED program simply because there is permanency, right? And it is just unfortunate in some of the LGU museums that they survive based on who is their incumbent politician. That's why even in LGU museums, what we are trying to encourage is that, okay, the first question we ask when we do our technical assistance is that, where is your funding lodged? Is it lodged under the office of the mayor or the governor, or is it lodged under the tourism? That is normally the course, right? Number two, is there an item,
Mm.
no, that is there that is exclusively for a museum worker? Why? Because that will create the permanent structure already. Because if you are just a floating contractual, then you will disappear with the idea. Then that is when all of these hurt aches come in. That's why it's the permanency, of the idea of a museum, which the first agenda, in LGU museums. Unlike in university museums, wherein more or less you are already, in fact, your problem is reversed. You want to put up a museum because the university likes it. And of course we will have to wear our a separate hat, no, when we approach you, because iba yung inyong structural component. It's the perpetuity which is there in a university museum, and it is not in a government museum. However, because you're a private museum, right, you have the right to exist, and we are not setting you aside. In fact, the NCCA had helped a lot of private museums. What you will do is you will request for a technical assistance. The technical assistance will happen, and then there will be a report, right? This report will now the basis of how far you can request in terms of monies, And remember, there's a deadline. I think the deadline is consistent. For the next year, the deadline is the September of the current year.
Mm.
That's why you have to prepare. You have to make sure that all of these things are put together. Then engage yourself. Make sure that you are stable, and you are what you call this. Uh, you can account Remember, these are all government funds, right? You'll be able to do some kind of accounting, and you can do proper liquidation of each project. Then you will have no problems.
Thank you, Sir Danny. In relation to your question about funding between private and LGU led museums, no, there is a question from Precious Inosa. So regarding management and administration, should a community museum that is LGU funded be under the economic development cluster or income generating, or is it under the educational cluster?
Actually, right now with the development plan set up, it's better that you are not in the educational sector, you are in the developmental sector. Why? Because all the monies are plowed there, right? In the development plan of the 5-year development plan, when the LGU is required, to establish and sustain and maintain a museum, then you're protected because it's a 5-year development plan. Then, unless you are a university museum like most of you are, then perhaps you will be better served under the educational system. However, there should be really a matching of curriculum vis-a-vis your museum, right? For it to be what you call sustainable, right? If you are a science-based museum, therefore, it is automatically under the presumption that you will have a science museum
Mhm.
in your school.
Okay. Thank you, Sir Danny. So again, with the relationship of the museums to LGUs,
Yeah.
there's a question from Jerome Dio. First, he said that thank you for the presentation, and then he asked, is it necessary for the museum to be under the provincial tourism office and having the provincial tourism officer as the overall supervisor of the museum instead of a curator,
This is
which is the
okay.
usual problem for museums
Yes,
now.
actually, that has been the always the problem that we encounter on ground, right? That's why the engagement of why a museum should be put up, right, should be understood by the head of the agency or the head of the government, right? Looking at it, there are no. Please take note that is one of our problems, and I hope this will be resolved soon. That museology is not considered a profession because there are no museology courses available. The only people who will be able to get this, fortunately, if there is an masteral program on museology, or they are given grants or scholarship and they go abroad, right? However, when they come back, right, there is no aggregation that will protect them as museologists. This is why I welcome perfectly this opportunity wherein Ched has already interfaced, and I was already discussing this already with Dr. Alvarez, that siguro this is a very good platform of looking forward that this becomes now an institutionalized unit wherein you will have what you call a museum summer institute. Why? There is already a move, no? And it's slowly going there, that eventually there will be some kind of accreditation of museums and museum workers. And this is a very important, very uh, what you call delicate component, because nobody can just accredit anything without a basis, right? Therefore, as I will say, which is in my mind always, that we are just the step brother of the tourism sector, and we have to win out of that gradually. It is so nice also that a lot of the tourism officers that we have encountered like the idea of another entity that will be specialized to handle their museums. But the reality is there is no program, because the moment you say by law that there should be a museologist, how do you measure that he is really a museologist? Of course, the basic question is that what is the degree? by which he earned his college program from. That's why although it's uh, the institution, the creation of the course is something that will have to be attended to, and I hope with the which I think there are already certain moves, how do we accredit our museum workers? Although it's going to be difficult to do it from the collegiate level, we already had one time discussed how about our technicians, right? How about those working with us, as purely technicians? That's why even TESDA is very open. Yeah, we can create that training program, but you give us the curriculum and you give us the trainer. And that will be able to qualify this person into some kind of a technical position, right? And I said, yeah, let's start from there, and then eventually hoping that the collegial level becomes expanded, right? Because I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, even the museology masteral program is still not very common in our colleges and universities. And my only hope is that it is going to be the state universities who should initiate it. Why? Private universities will look at it as a business model, right? Why will I offer this course? What is it, in terms of returnee, in terms of enrollees and etc. Unlike the state university, which is mandated to do things that are impossible in the private sector.
Okay, Sir Danny, would you like to have a 3-minute break?
I can go on forever. No,
Just want
kasi
to make sure.
hinayang ako because there you have already your you already have your participants on board, and I don't want them to, you know, but I am still cool. I can
Okay,
still go
that's
on.
awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so let's continue. In relation to the tourism and museums, there is a question here from Shekina Pagtulingan. He is a museum. He's with the tour. Well, anyway, the question is, how can we introduce museum organization to tour guides, as some of us would really like to specialize in this? How can we work collaboratively with the curators and museum practitioners?
Okay, that's a very good question. That's why in my presentation, I I had included that the docent training program be part and parcel of the program of the state university or state college. Why? Docent training is very important because you can also have other people not in the university who are into this thing on how to do museum guiding, right? And museum guiding is very different from tour guiding, right? And it is important that there should be some kind of a syllabus specifically for museum tour guiding, especially if you are a heritage town, right? And there's a lot of other things, in your community that you have to string together because the total narrative is part and parcel of your museum exhibits. And this can happen, uh, as I said, in a program wherein it is immersion. Uh, the unfortunate reality is that there is a need for continuing educational program. However, as you could see, you have to gather all of these speakers and put them in one room, right? Unfortunately, the reality in the Philippines that all of us have our own little universes. And while it is in our heart to teach or even cascade whatever we know, informally to others, this cannot happen if it is just going to be what, a 2-day session, right? And there are no opportunities for you to read up, right? You just listen and you take notes, but there are no interactive component as to how you do this, right? That's why I said a summer program is the best. Why? it is confined in a longer time. You can put together your faculty or your resource people continuously. Then the program is not an 8-hour thing. You can even exchange things during dinner, during breaks, etc. And what is important is you come and visit museums together, right? And you will hear the experts do the tour. So you're engaged. You know, yeah, that is a way pala of doing it, no? Rather than them being what I see in the book, which is history based, right? And unfortunately, if the book is purely architectural in nature, so they will describe all the windows and all the doors, and where are you in all of these things, right? So I think that is the solution, wherein a longer period, perhaps, wherein you will be allowed to do an immersion program. Perhaps siguro within a 3-week course can be the minimum, perhaps. Those are the things that we have to engage ourselves with. I am very happy that this is only the first, right, of the many series of the things put together by Ched. And that's why I did not want to overwhelm you. That's why I told myself I will just do something that is purely teaser, and let's work from there. And I think I'm quite successful simply because the more questions are popping up, the more we, you know, understand why we like museology or museum work.
Yeah, that's right, Sir Danny. So we have a lot of questions.
Hmm.
What you mentioned earlier about the summer immersion program, that was actually built in the CHED project for this museum training. But unfortunately, pandemic came. So we have this has been totally interrupted. So we plan to invite 120 participants in Baguio. They are housed in a hotel. There will be museum tours also, and our museum specialists will be the ones guiding our participants. But hopefully, when travel restrictions are over, we can plan maybe next year. If things are okay, then we can do the summer museology programs also for our participants. And in addition, the aside from Museo Cordillera, we are also in partnership with the Summer Research Institute
Mhm.
of the College of Social Sciences in UP Baguio that gives or offers training on a specialized area such as this in museology. All right, so we have more questions. So we go back to collections management. So there's a question from Raquel Tisha Palaganas, and she's asking. She's now in Cagayan de Oro. So the question is, we already have a collection, but now to make an existing collection relevant, uh, okay, they already have an existing collection, but the question is, how do you make this collection, this existing collections, relevant to the times of our struggle? Maybe he's referring to the pandemic, or he's referring to political struggles, or any other form of external factors affecting the relevance of these collections. Do you have any suggestions how to make these collections relevant?
Well, number one, we provide continuity historically, whatever realm, scientific, social science, or whatever, right? And we can even document the present and relate it to the past. No, those are the challenges of telling stories. That's why I think also one part of the thing that we need to engage our trainees is that you have to really go into some kind of fundamental creative writing. Because number one, the story will spark a question or a series of questions. There will be, it's always important that you initiate a dialogue, right, between the object and the viewer, or even with the audience themselves, right? That's why I said symposium, lecture, and all of these things are part and parcel of the museum uh, uh, work, right? And change is inevitable. These things is part and parcel of our existence. Therefore, we should be able to now declare how do we now define and exhibit change, right? For example, this one, no? This webinar with so many people attending could have not happened if there was no pandemic, because what they will do is to do the summer program, which is very limited, right? And it is long haul, meaning one section per summer and several summers to go, right? This is the upside of the pandemic. When we are forced to listen to ourselves and we are forced to come up as a group, and try to engage ourselves. And if it is political strife, economic strife, or like this, the health situation, uh, it's important that we know how to relate our objects with the situation. Uh, if you are an ethnological museum, that will not be a problem, perhaps. History, if you have less objects, the archival wealth, is something that you have to look at. There are very, very impressive pictures of the past that can really move the 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 feelings, of your audience. And we're reading or articulating the past by using some reference elderly in your community can also be a very good engagement, towards this. That's why it's just a matter of changing your course of action from what is traditional to something that is effective. You have to make sure that people are affected, right? And affectations come when they engage themselves with a picture, with an object, right? Or perhaps if you are such a conceptual artist, right, which is happening right now in some of Europe uh, galleries and museums, wherein all of these things are engaged by irritating the status quo. You expect a museum with objects, then all of a sudden you see a gallery that is empty. Then you wonder why. And then it slowly builds up, right? Because now you have interactive opportunities because of technology, right? And then all of a sudden an object appears, whatever. So it's the dramatization, it's putting together a whole scenario of an engagement, right? And there are several ways of how you can really affect your exhibits. Number two, if you are an ethnological or a scientific museum, and then how do you engage the others because you are truly into that world where everything is described scientifically? Will an artwork by a visual artist emphasize something out of your collection, right? Or even what you call an animation, that will propel you that you see other things, not in the collection. This is the important uh, collaboration of video, of storytelling, of archival materials, as well as exhibits, can come to fore. I hope I answered your question. Let's give time to Dr. Ikin, to ask any more questions. Let me see. Can I answer one of the questions, no, that I see on the chat box? Other, this is coming from Martin. Other than membership in ICOM, kindly share what museum bodies organization in the Philippines can small and starting university and LGU museums join to get acquire knowledge and develop competencies in museum management. As I said, right, the first step that you ought to do is make yourself a member of the regional association, no, of which your area is in. And then from there, you'll be able to now what I call cross-pollinate, no, with others in terms of how museums operate. Then you will have access also to grants that are available and the technical assistance modules, no, of a lot of organizations to answer your need. I just had to just emphasize why I had said that perhaps you should look at ICOM as a platform, as an entry point, right? Because sometimes we get overwhelmed with our problems and say, how can we solve this? And then all of a sudden you read up at ICOM and say, a lot of museums share your same problem. So you're not unique, right? That gives you that elbow room and say, yeah, we can solve this together, right? And this is something that I really had to engage you because you are from universities and you do read. And reading, especially now that everything is online, right, uh, can really give you a lot of insights on how to proceed and put together your museums, right? Uh, there are other organizations, no, under the online thing in Facebook, wherein it's already very program specific. You will have your engagement towards local history, right? Or state history for that matter, vis-a-vis national history. And all of these things can lead you na, yes, because we can do pala local history and not be dependent on presenting something that is national history, simply because national history is already taken care of the National Historical Institute of the Philippines. No? So those are the things that you perhaps can look at. No, again, there are opportunities, but be a member of your organization because that is where the networking begins.
Thank you, Sir Danny. I just got cut off
Yeah, yeah,
for
no
a
problem.
minute,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm
I was trying
connected
to
again.
answer. Yeah, I was trying to answer those that I have been I read one question in the chat box, which I answered
All
while
right,
away.
that's
Okay, please continue.
yeah. There's also a question from YouTube. Very briefly, although this will be addressed in the next coming week session, no? From Raquel Hieronimo. She's asking, I am just curious of how to become a curator of a starting museum. What are your
Okay.
thoughts on this?
Uh, if you look at the dictionary and what curator means, it's actually just management. You're a manager. Therefore, what are the core competencies under that management scheme, right? It's again, it's a museum, so it's a different platform. If you are so, if you are people who read a lot and like books, right? You have now to shift your gear because your medium is not the printed page. It's the space. It's a room, right? Therefore, looking at it, you have to understand why, if you are a good curator, you would need someone who will be able to work with you in terms of how you put together your exhibits, perhaps an exhibition designer. However, the exhibition designer cannot dictate what he wants. It depends again sa curatorial narrative, right?
Mhm.
The curatorial narrative is not only a story, it has an objective. And the objective must be very clear, right? It is not just a matter of laboring it with very nice words. It is really saying how you impact the idea using an object, a picture, or a video, for that matter, or the composition of the three of them. It is now looking at a stratification of your audience, right? Who are your audience? Who are you talking with? Are you talking to school children? Are you talking to college students? Are you talking with the elderly of your community? How you now be able to reach them using just one exhibit? All of these are the challenges of the curator because uh, the process is really putting together the concept, and if the concept works, you will be able to come up with what are the steps to implement them. Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Sir Danny. So a good curator is also dependent on how he or she creates the biography of these objects. So there's a question from Kisandra Mariano about there is a collection, but there is no museum. For instance, do you have any suggestions for the collection of artifacts while there is no museum yet? Uh, she's telling us that their museum focuses on human rights violation victims. However, many of the families are already wanting to donate their fragile artifacts to that group. No? So how do you deal with this? There's abundance of collection, but there is no museum.
Okay. Uh, the pandemic had taught us that there are a lot of ways by which we can present uh, exhi- uh, an exhibition, and you can come up with a virtual exhibit for that matter, right? And looking at it, that is where documentation comes in. Simply because if you have the objects already translated in another medium, you can do wonders. Physically, what you can do is you have to process all of these photographs and archival materials. You can scan them. Number two, you can just have storage,
Mhm.
temporary storage, or if you want to create an impact in your existing museum, I would rather that you put together a visible storage because that is now the repository of the angst of people, and it can already create as a very good statement wherein all of these are put together and pulled together as visible storage file, very neatly put together cabinets. You put them all there, and then you have a video, perhaps outside, and you can just show who are these families, what are they going, etc., while you're waiting for your bigger museum, right? And again, everything that we do is always uh, in one area. Uh, can you also do something that what we call a traveling exhibition of sorts? Although this is not practical at this time, but again, looking at it, what you call suitcase exhibits, right? That will pronounce the the mission of your museum, right? Therefore, there are several ways of engaging your public, and the more you have material, which I envy you, because some of the museums don't have a lot of materials, and apparently you have already, putting them in different media alternatives, can work wonders.
Okay. Sir Danny, we are discussing about a collection without a museum. But in
Yep.
this instance, there is a question from Reni Lamela, where there is abundance of museums. No, so he's asking. What about instances when the community donate objects for the museums? What if these objects are no longer worthy of display? Can we deny accepting them? For instance, in the case of Masbate, there is an abundance of artifacts not properly collected because of the absence of the museum. The only state college in Masbate in the province is very much interested in establishing this museum. So if earlier we talked about scarcity of or lack of museum, but this time there's abundance. So how do you deal
Yeah.
with this abundant artifacts on the
Actually,
con?
you should create awareness and excitement. That's why the online thing is something that we have to take advantage of. Imagine if they're all coded or they have all been uh, documented, by your museum, and you just bring them out in the open and say, are there any other museums who would interested in an exchange program of some of these objects with us? That's why a collections policy had to be in place before you can do this, and your board can put it together. That's why lending, borrowing, and lending out is another component, especially if it is between universities, that can be very effective. And letting go of objects, as I said, is the accessioning component, right? And it has to be very clear if that is allowed, no, by your university first before you can, or an LGU first before you can do. But again, I said you have to be very careful that you are unloading because you're buying another object, or you can have an exchange program with other museums, right? Because uh, take it regionally. That's why, again, why is it that the regional association is very helpful? Simply because uh, you're already a member of a bigger family, right? Among provinces, 3 or 4 provinces perhaps, and one city, and you can do exchange programs regarding these objects, right? And can you also engage your perhaps uh, local government? No? Why can't we come up with a very small exhibit in the municipio or in the city hall, of certain objects? And these objects are commonplace, but you delightfully you can put something that will make them more exciting. Because an object can tell you about who the family is. And in a family, you can create a family tree. And the family tree can tell you who are the historians, you are the leaders in your community, and all of these things.
So, Sir Danny, we have a lot of questions on my left-hand computer and my right computer. So, I'm looking left and right just to assimilate all of these questions all together. But some of the questions are really, some of them are technical. Like, for instance, maybe briefly you can tell us about this ICOM, the UMVAC. University Association of University Museums and the ICOM. How do you become a member of this? Maybe briefly, and then we can share it later on in our emails how they can access this information. Maybe just a brief
Okay.
note.
ICOM, International Council of Museums Philippines, is in the Facebook, right? They are now in for it has become dormant for a while. Now they're very active, correct? And but again, I have to be very, very frank with you. There are two classes of membership under the ICOM Philippines. One is individual and one is institutional. However, the institutional membership might not be as attractive simply because it is a little expensive. However, the individual can really open doors, right? Because the moment you become a member, you apply, and then when you apply, there is a questionnaire. That questionnaire will already lead you to several committees within ICOM. Which of these committees would you want to be a member of, other than being a member of ICOM? Because the moment you register, you will be flooded with a lot of information via Facebook or your Facebook or your email regarding what is happening in that committee, right? Therefore, all those problems that we are now perhaps discussing, some of them really are already uh, sectionalized in ICOM, no? And that happens also as an indication of cross pollination in terms of what are the best practices, no, of different museums. And for university museums and collections, this is again more or less for institutional universities. Why? The cross pollination in terms of expertise, right? Because the university museums, uh, the University Museums and Collections Committee has a pool of experts which you can invite and visit your university. And perhaps they also tell you what are the grants available for you to apply so that this expert can come and visit you. Likewise, if you are an expert in your area, that exposes you also to some opportunities of scholarly exchange. Uh, Again, competencies. That's why I said these are the opportunities for you to be able to grow as a museum worker, right? And for your museum to be at least recognized, no? Because the moment you are recognized, not because you are the best, but you need help, you might discover and say, one university museum abroad and say, hey, we have that collection, and we can, and we can just now that you have a museum in your area, perhaps we can return this object to you. All of these things. Okay.
Thank you, Sir Danny, for the most generous time that you have given us this morning. It's already 11:56.
Yep.
Maybe we can take one or two more questions.
Okay.
Okay, so there's a question from Jimbo Fatala. So in relation to collections management policy, uh, how can a museum have an efficient emergency disasters, specifically if the museum has limited resources, staff, and of course recovery funds? How do you deal with this?
Well, actually, again, tapping those who are willing to donate their services, right? Collections management, the key there is that you have to have a legal document in place, right? Because you are talking about exchanges, correct? And perhaps there is a lawyer in your community or in even your school who can help craft together a very good collections policy, especially what are the restrictions, what are the allowable, and what are the things that can protect your collection, right? And do not get overwhelmed with all of these things happening and everything you hear, correct? What is important is that you have already an understanding of the enormous complexity surrounding a museum and how it is going to function. And because we have to provide you with the landscape, right? But again, a small museum is the most fascinating thing that you can put together. And looking at it, you build your museum gradually. And there is always an opportunity that you will be able to put together an exhibit without all of those fancy lights, those expensive platforms and cabinets, etc., etc. Uh, Again, I repeat, if you have a good story, you have a gold mine. So that's how I figure it out as part of the answer. No? Unfortunately, I might not have answered you completely because I know for a fact that you wanted to hear another sort of solution, no, to an existing problem. Let me see. Is there another question? Is Ikin back? Not yet.
Hello, Sir Danny. Meron pong power interruption lang.
Okay.
Papunta na rin po dito sa isang site si Ma'am Ikin.
Okay, no problem. Pero naririnig naman ako ng ano, no? Ng ating mga audience.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Nakalive pa po tayo.
Okay. Well, that is also something I expected, yung yung electrical interruption because we are still having the what you call the typhoon, no?
The other one. Ayan po.
Yeah.
Hi. Here.
It's part of the reality, Ikin. Okay, meron lang isang tanong, sasagutin ko muna while you catch your breath. No? Sinasabi dito at sa isang tanong na po pwede bang tumulong ang LGU sa pagtatayo ng isang school museum? No? Why not? Di ba? Kasi all it needs is an LGU resolution that they are allowed to assist a school in their geographic entity, no, that they can create. Kasi nga, remember there are several audiences that we have to attend to. If it is a school museum of elementary or high school, so iba ang tema noon, ano? And again, that is also very nice because the engagement of the LGU directly benefits their constituents. And these museums can now be a very good platform for the teachers, no, to be able to teach uh, properly, no, their students. I don't see any reason why it should not happen as long as it is procedurally protected because baka ma-question bakit tumutulong ang isang munisipyo o isang siyudad sa isang eskwela, right? Again, the educational advantage and heritage preservation has no political boundaries. Kaya po pwede naman niyang i-justify. Kaya lang dapat ilagay lang sa isang magaling na memorandum of agreement or perhaps a document, no, that the local government is assisting a school in your area. Okay. So that's my answer. Are you back, Ikin? Okay, take it from there. Mm. Ikin, there.
Hi, Sir Danny. Thank you for responding to all of these questions. We just had an explosion somewhere. I don't know what post, but we have the generator on.
Does it mean,
So it's already
is that a signal that we should all end this na?
okay. So, but we have a very productive discussion about so many issues that we covered for this 2 hour discussion. So it's 12:02, and we would like to thank the participants for joining us. Thank you, Sir Danny, for your most generous time and your thoughtful answers to many of these questions. Unexpectedly, we will take note of all of the questions that were posted.
Oops. It looks like there is a technical problem, no, that we are encountering due to the bad weather. Is there anyone from the technical staff who can hear me right now? Yeah, I think I understand there are still some problems, no, that they are encountering. But again, I think we're almost done, no, with our presentation. I will try to scroll and look at the other questions, no, and hopefully I can still answer them, right? Uh, Well, I think for some of the questions, no, regarding technical assistance, what you can do is you can write directly Museo Kordilyera, Dr. Amores, no, if you wish to have more interactions with their museum, no, and I'm sure they will be able to assist you in whatever they could in terms of the establishment of your museum. That is an answer uh, sa tanong ni Reni Lamela. I understand that the program is will be viewed on YouTube eventually. No? Again, uh, I got a note here from Dr. Ikin that the technical problem seems to be a little bit messy, you know. So what she is requesting me is to close the session for today, and other than that, I think then we can we can really close the session. Ako ay nagpapasalamat, no, sa lahat ng attendees, no, dahil nga nakita ko ang inyong ang inyong desire, no, to really put together your a good museum, no, for your school. And I am also very appreciative of the questions that had been asked, and now we know already, you know, what are the things, you know, the training needs or technical needs for you in establishing your museum, or perhaps engaging your office officials, no, on how important the museum is, not only for the university or college, but also for your communities. That being said, I would like to end the session, and maraming salamat sa lahat sa inyo. And that doesn't mean we will not entertain more questions. Feel free to post your questions so that we will be able to uh, answer them. Again, this is a series, so expect another session, no, after all of this has been completed, no. And I hope you attend all of the sessions that have been put together by Museo Kordilyera and Ched. Again, maraming salamat. Mag-ingat ka tayong lahat, and take care. Have a nice day. This ends the session. Thank you.